Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Crucible. I'm your host, Zen Shapiro. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's been a while. I haven't been around as much as I would like to have been, but life happens sometimes. Happy to be here tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Very excited. We've got another great debate lined up. We've got Andrew Wilson on the second of his back-to-back, I believe. He's going to be taking on Deacon Joseph Suaiden of the True Orthodox Apologetics channel. They are going to be debating how to deal with heresy, when to leave the church. It's going to be another inter-Orthodox ecclesiastical historical debate. Should be a lot of fun for those that are into this kind of thing. I know I am. So I hope you guys are excited for that. Before we get into it, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. We are on the limited channel still. But we are hoping to get back to the main channel as soon as tomorrow. As soon as these strikes fall off, everybody knows they're bullshit. But it happens. We've made it through. We appreciate everybody's continued support here on the backup channel. We're making it through, but we're gonna try to get back to the main channel as soon as we can. So be sure to like, share, subscribe. Still boost us in the algorithm. This channel is now monetized, so you can send in those super chats on YouTube. You can become a channel member. Throw the tomato soup cans. All the good shit that you can do on the main channel, you can do it here too. So please do all that, all the YouTube shit to support us here at the Crucible. Also, the Dono Chat link is pinned at the top of the live chat, so send those super chats on Dono Chat. That's our preferred method, but YouTube works as well if you want to ask your questions, insult the debaters, So that being said, we are going to have a quick intermission, and we will be right back with our debaters. And we're back. Thank you all for being here out in Crucible Land. Thank you, Deacon Joseph Suaiden and Andrew Wilson, for being here for the debate. Deacon Joseph, go ahead, take a second, shout yourself out. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Easiest place to find me, nftu.net. NFTU is our apologetics and news site. It mostly was a news site until about 5 years ago. We've moved more into the apologetics space with our YouTube channel, and we've kind of co-branded them together. So nftu.net will lead you to latest news articles, or we'll be putting this video up. So that's kind of where we are. So I would recommend going to nftu.net. And my name is Deacon Joseph Suaiden.
All right. Thank you for being here tonight. Andrew, go ahead. Shout yourself out. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson, host of the one and only Crucible. I'm also happy, kind of have to apologize a bit to my opponent because I had to put this debate off so many times, but that was due to the fact that we're in one of the craziest cycles politically that I've ever seen. So I do apologize about that, but thank you graciously for accepting my debate challenge on this. And I think that we're going to have kind of an interesting conversation tonight. Other than that, don't really have much more to say.
All right. And So those of you that aren't already familiar, the format's going to be 7 minutes opening statements from each side, followed by roughly an hour to an hour and a half of open dialogue, at which point each debater will get a closing statement, and then we will go to call-ins and super chats. If you want to call in, get a Discord link, or if you're already in the Discord, get a stream and then get a stream link from the mods in the Discord. You can call in, ask your question directly to either debater. And at the end, we're going to do super chat Q&A. So send those super chats in either on YouTube or on Dono Chat, which is pinned in the top of the live chat. And also, don't forget to become a channel member and remain a channel member to support us. It's the best way to support us. We are going to be going back to the main channel as soon as possible, like I mentioned earlier. But we still appreciate everybody's continued support here on the limited channel. So yeah, we're going to get into this. We did discuss backstage that Andrew will be opening first. So whenever you're ready, Andrew, you've got 7 minutes on the clock for your opening statement.
Before you start the clock, let me say two things. First, I'll kind of crack an Orthodox joke that I thought was pretty funny. I was around a whole group of clergy at an event I was at recently, and I said, if we strapped a bunch of Sons of Anarchy jackets on you guys, nobody'd be able to tell the difference. And you could have heard a pin drop. And they looked at me like they were all going to kill me, and then the table burst out in laughter. So I was like, well, I think I got away with the joke. Sorry about the backlighting too. I turned that on, and for some reason a wire shorted the second I turned it on. So maybe that's like an ominous precedent for the debate. So diving into my opening statement here, I do want to first apologize to my opponent because he's been waiting patiently for about 3 weeks. This isn't common, but it's been unusually active this time of year for online content, especially debate content due to the election cycle. And I also wanted to say that the last time the Deacon was here, myself and Zen had a bit of an argument over the use of his honorific. And ultimately, I ended up yielding to Zen, as I think even if a rabbi was in front of me, I might address him as rabbi in his tradition, even if that honorific didn't have the same meaning to me that it did to his clergy. So I do apologize for that. It was disrespectful in retrospect. And so I wanted to make a good faith effort to apologize. And I hope you accept that in good faith. Ultimately, though, I'm Irish, and I'm going to use that as an excuse. But as my wife says, I don't need to be a rotten bastard 100% of the time. And we've compromised on 50%, which I think is reasonable. So on to the debate at hand. To explain some thoughts on why I even took this debate, it's for myself. I don't particularly care this time around if I win or lose, but instead maybe it'll help me sort out some of my own thoughts. Having been disappointed for the most part in what are considered spiritual fathers of the church, I have dealt with who either outright dismiss your questions or pretend you don't even exist. I've been told by many I've talked to that this is all but too common, with seemingly more people feeling like me than don't feel like me when it comes to orthodoxy. Of course, the answer to this is like the answer to everything. Not all men are equal, and some spiritual fathers are going to be good and some bad. And maybe I just need to continue my search, as so many before me have had to do. But I readily admit I have had to internally tangle with this question, which seems to me to be a very important question. When do you leave? At what point is it appropriate to walk away from a church? Or if the Orthodox Church becomes so corrupted, is it even the church anymore? The assurances and the answers I've gotten to these questions have been less than satisfactory. Even from bishops, it's hard to get a straight answer. So the last debate, I listened, and I listened with a keen interest. I don't feel like I got any closer to the answer, but perhaps by debating against leaving the Orthodox Church, the answers will become more obvious to me. The basic argument at hand I heard was that ecumenism led to the schism of those who call themselves true Orthodox. I am in no way well versed in theology. I'm a political commentator, and political debate is my focus rather than apologetics. However, this position on leaving due to ecumenism seems to have logical problems with it, and logic is what I do. My first issue is how many of the clergy must practice ecumenism before it would be okay to leave the church? I mean, obviously, I've seen with my own eyes and videos this happen, And there are whole movements who demand reconciliation with Rome to become papists. On the other hand, while I may have gripes against some of the spiritual fathers I've dealt with, they seemingly are staunchly against the practice of ecumenism. So while we can claim some of them do this, we can't claim that all of them do. So how many does it take before schism becomes the order of the day? Next, how does one retain their faith that God will always keep the church intact? Necessarily, a schism would seem to undermine that value. Even if it's just framed as a reformation and not a schism, the church will have at some level changed from the fundamentals of its original traditions. And then third, what would make this practice of schism any different than Protestant traditions breaking off from the main body? When researching the old calendarists, it wasn't really a single schism, but a schism leading to a schism, leading to a schism in a seeming chain that doesn't seem altogether figured out now. So what gives you the right to do this? These are my first objections, and I really can't wait to dive into them. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll yield my time over.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement, Andrew. And Deacon Joseph, whenever you're ready, you got 7 minutes on the clock for your opening.
Okay. I don't have my clock open today. First off, I'd like to thank my opponent for his candor. Those were serious questions, and they seem to come from a very real place. I'm going to be honest, I have kind of a presentation. Unfortunately, I was so busy that it has 3 slides. So I'm going to start by answering some of these questions as well as I can. And then I'm going to try to get to this presentation. Actually, maybe the presentation will help answer it. So we're going to start with that, actually, because it makes a lot of sense. Give me one moment. I just want to share this presentation. Give me a moment here.
Yeah, just hit share screen whenever you're ready, and I'll bring it
Okay,
up.
not a problem.
Zen,
Okay.
I don't mind if he goes over time on his presentation.
Yeah, I'll just stop. I'll stop the clock right now. So while he's doing that.
Okay. Right, so let me see here. Okay, click on Start Slideshow. I did this wrong. Hold on. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share this screen here.
I do not see anything. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Right.
So we're going to share. Or
Yep, you're good.
slideshow. Okay, hold on. Okay, so basically we're sharing here, and so the question is, when to leave the church? Question simple. Our Lord established the Orthodox Church as one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. When should one leave her? The answer is never. It's a pretty straightforward position, and I realize that it's going to lead to some confusion in the initial stages, which is why I'm going to get to Andrew's questions. But that is the basic thing. And so I'm going to just stop sharing here. And if I could get that off the screen there. Okay.
And Deacon,
right, so,
Deacon, if you can hear me, make sure to close out of your PowerPoint because it's really messing up your audio. So if you close it out,
doing it right now.
It should sound better.
Okay, give me a moment. Closed it out. So hopefully that improves it.
Okay. It should just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So then, basically to answer these questions, because they're hard questions, obviously, and I'm still seeing the blinking. It's bothering me a little bit.
Yeah, it started right when you brought up your PowerPoint.
Go ahead and just hop right out and come back in, and let's see if that.
Okay.
If that, I think it was just the opening
of
the PowerPoint that did it.
Give me just.
Yep. Okay. No problem.
And while we're waiting, I want to just remind everybody, do all the YouTube shit. Even though we're on the limited channel, it still helps us as we navigate through the strikes and the bans and all that crap. So, yeah, do all the YouTube shit, like, share, subscribe, become a channel member. And we are going to be taking callers at the end. So if you want to call in, ask a question to either side, you can do so. Just get a stream link from the Discord mods. Oh, here, all that. Yep, go ahead. And, all right. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Deacon.
Yeah. Okay, so the question of how many clergy does it take is a valid one. there's an old saying in I believe it's in Greek that a fish rots from the head. So the main concern that one has to have when you're dealing with this sort of situation is, as I mentioned in the previous debate, the episcopacy. It's your bishops. I've met people who say I would probably become true Orthodox tomorrow, but I love my priest. Well, your priest isn't the preserver of the communion. He is an assistant to the bishop, just as a deacon is an assistant to the bishop. So if your bishop is proclaiming heresy, or if your bishop is teaching false teachings, it's the bishop that is an issue in that particular moment. The next question we had is, how can one be sure that God protects the church? Again, that's really a faith. It's really a question of faith. We believe, as Orthodox Christians, that Christ established the Orthodox Church. I did not, for example, I mentioned that I had been in what is referred to as World Orthodoxy. By the way, this was a minor thing that the people were wondering what I meant by World Orthodoxy. We didn't actually make up that term. It was actually made up by Father John Meyerndorf in 1970 of the OCA. He used it to express the communion of the official churches, and he thought it was an apt term. Unfortunately, old calendars, being the sarcastic people that we are, thought the term World Orthodoxy just sounded way too apropos, and we stuck with it. But in any case, the point is that when I was there for a year, I never believed I wasn't Orthodox. I didn't believe that I wasn't previously Orthodox. I don't believe that I'm not I'm Orthodox now and I wasn't then. Orthodox Christians are not defined primarily by their bishops. They're defined by their faith. It's the bishop's job to protect that faith. And the final question you had, I kind of missed part of it because it was like, basically I got up to what would make this practice of schism, and then I thought maybe I'll just go into the presentation. And I actually have more stuff, some books and stuff, but unfortunately, I have a feeling there's going to be audio issues. So I'm going to try to work with what I can, but I definitely do see a value in answering the question. It is not easy. Every single person who is Orthodox in this audience probably went through a bit of a shock. And I didn't mean to be hurtful in that sense. And I don't mean to say, because there were people who thought, he's saying we're not Orthodox. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we're talking about at the episcopal level. Basically, once a bishop falls into heresy, it becomes incumbent upon the faithful to leave that bishop, not leave the church. None of us leave the church. We try to protect the church. And so this is the most important question. Now, as Andrew did mention, there are a number of schisms that have occurred since. Some of them have been resolved. Some of them have not. Some of them are new. This is kind of what happens. Unfortunately, the idea that the church was monolithically just this one big body that was perfectly happy and the heretics just kind of fell off like apples from a tree, it's not a real reading of history. In order to understand Orthodox history, you have to look, if you look in, your Jordanville prayer book, right there in the memorizer, it says, heal the schisms of the churches. The reason it says that is not because it's talking about Roman Catholicism or Protestantism. It's because there are always schisms in the church. It has happened literally every century. And they get resolved, and they get better, and they get worse, and they break up, and they get better, and they get worse ad nauseum. So it's not... I feel bad for people when they get sold like the Conciliar Press line, like, if you ever saw those booklets or pamphlets from Conciliar Press, and they're like, oh, the Orthodox Church, it has 5 patriarchates, and we've been around since the 1st century. So simple, but also not accurate. I hope we can really explore these questions more over time, and that's what we're here for.
All right, thank you guys for those opening statements. Deacon, your audio did start clipping towards the end there. Honestly, I don't know what to tell you. If you got other programs, just close. I would recommend just closing everything down. See if that helps. But it's kind of doing the same thing that it was earlier. It's not the end of the world, though. If I don't know if you want to try to leave and come back again.
I'm gonna try to clear my cache and leave. So give me just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, we won't go anywhere. Nico says my audio is staticking. Of course it is. Is it bad?
Well, no, your audio's all right. It'll clear up in a second. It always does. My audio though is perfect. So there is that.
We can't all be like Andrew. we just can't. But,
yeah, I'm sorry for the tech issues to the audience, but yeah, I do want to get into this because I have a lot I have a lot to say and kind of tangle up with on this. So
yeah, I mean, I'm excited to hear what goes down, but somebody asked a good question, Johns. Why is it always on important debate streams the audio decays into garble? It's a good question. I don't know, but we're gonna try to make do here. We got Deacon Joseph back. All right. Give me a test 1 2 there, Deacon.
Test 1 2.
Okay, it's good right now. I would just try not to open up anything else or run any other programs.
Yeah. Okay. That's understandable.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Thank you guys for those opening statements. We're going to get into the open dialogue. I want to remind everybody one last time. If I haven't reminded you enough so far, I'm going to remind you one more time to do all the YouTube shit, like, share, subscribe, send in the super chats. We're going to read all of them at the end. If you got questions, you want to hurl insults, do what you got to do. Send them on YouTube, Dono Chat. Link is pinned in the top of the live chat. Become a channel member, even though we're on the backup channel. It still helps. We appreciate everybody's support, and we are going to be taking callers. Get in that Discord. Get a stream link from the mods. You can call in, ask a question directly to either debater. That being said, we're going to get into the open dialogue. Roughly an hour to an hour and a half. Whoever wants to go first, I'm not going to really direct this.
I'll dive in. I'll dive in first. So, Deacon, just so that you understand too, even if we get heated throughout this debate, I don't take anything in a debate personally. I never have. So I just want to get at kind of these questions and see if we can get through as much of it as we can. Kind of the first thing that you state is that it's the corruption of the bishops that you have to worry about. But the church works within a hierarchical structure. The bishops of today are not going to be the bishops of tomorrow. And if the priests are fantastic, which you say many people won't move over to true orthodoxy due to the fact that these priests are fantastic, those are going to be the bishops of tomorrow. So why would that be cause for schism?
It's a good question. And again, first off, now keep in mind that is an emotional reason. If someone says they like their priest, that is not a valid reason to stay within World Orthodoxy. What I was going to say on that, though, is that that's not actually true. The assumption, say, for example, you have a kindly old priest. He might have been a modernist 20 years ago. He might have gotten more traditional over time. But the point is he's going to die. Is he going to become a bishop? Not unless his wife dies first. Because the majority of priests in this country are married men. They're not monastics. So the monastics are where you would look in terms of seeing the future of the church. And if your monastics are engaged heavily in modernism, ecumenism, etc., nothing is going to change. There are very kindly priests, for example, in the Greek Archdiocese, but the Greek Archdiocese, from the pipeline from Holy Cross all the way to the more liberal monasteries, none of the Ephraimite monasteries are ever going to have candidates. They never do. Move up to diocesan positions. People complain about Elpidophoros, but the point is,
I'm really sorry to stop you, but the audio is clipping so badly. Do you have a cell phone? You can come in with your cell phone, and that might be a million times better.
I do. Give me a second. Let me try it.
Yeah. Come in with your cell phone instead, and we'll remove you on this end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Moon. I'm aware that it's really bad. We all were aware. I was just trying. I don't know. I thought we were just gonna have to make do with what we had. Hopefully this makes it better. But yeah, the debate is basically not going to happen if we can't fix this audio issue. So we really do need something to work itself out here.
Oh, we're gonna make
Maybe-
this work. We're gonna make
maybe
this
if
work.
maybe turning off the video would work too. I don't know if the phone doesn't work, but we'll see. Yeah, damn right, Nico. It's not Zen's fault. It's actually Andrew's fault. You know why? It's because he bragged about having, I got the perfect audio. I got perfect, taking away from everybody else's audio quality.
It just drains. It just drains their mics.
Oh, okay. And now apparently I'm blaming myself. Oh no, this is Crucible Clips. Okay. I was like, I didn't write this.
Just gets all of its energy from the other mics. It just absorbs it.
Yeah.
Hang on. It's as James True would say, it's my mic is elevate. No, what does he say? It's not elevation. What does he call it? No, he does call it elevation. I think that's what he calls it. Or man, I can't remember because that guy's a screwball, but
yeah, he is.
Elevation. I feel elevated. Yeah, exactly. Donatus. He says Andrew's vampire mic sucks the audio out of all others. Yeah, that's true. Wicked Wally makes a good point. He says, even though Andrew and I are Irish, at least we're not Italians. I think that's a fair point. Altitude. Democracy. Yes, it's altitude. My mic has the most altitude.
Democracy will determine whose fault it actually is. And right now, democracy is pointing to that it's all your fault, Andrew. The vampire mic is what is destroying this stream right now.
Yeah. I felt terrible because I'd like to have the Deacon on for other debates when other people want to challenge him. This is an open platform for that kind of thing, but I've literally had to blow him off for like 3 weeks in a row due to other things going on, and that's why I'm like, I really would like to just do this debate tonight, get it so that we can have it done and everybody can have their kind of say. So plus I really want to mix it up on it. So
yeah,
by the way, I think we may have a Vosh Jay Dyer debate coming up.
On what topic? Can you disclose
not gonna say yet. Not gonna say, but I think a Vosh Jay Dyer debate's coming up. And we're going to have a Pearly Things versus Nina debate coming up.
Everybody's favorite e-girls. Everybody's favorite e-girls on both
Pearly
sides.
Things versus Nina is coming to the Crucible, and also coming to the Crucible soon will be David Patrick Harry versus Cornelius. That's going to be excellent.
And we're also looking into a Professor Dave debate. If you guys are familiar with that guy, Professor Dave, we're looking to set him up with Jim Bob, potentially a 2v2. Maybe I'll be in the mix on that one. But we got a lot of good content coming up, so stay tuned. It's going to be fun. Here we go.
Oh wow, that's like 1,000,000 times better already.
Okay, Andrew, your mic just dropped off a cliff though. I could barely hear you. Now you're muted.
Yeah, it should be good now.
Okay, you're good now.
Yeah,
Deacon, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, 1,000,000 times better.
Yep, sounds perfect. All right.
Okay, so to kind of dive back in, dive back into this real quick with you, Deacon, let me just kind of reiterate what I was saying, which is that, the bishops are not going to be there. It's not a permanent state. This is constant flux within a hierarchy, and part of that hierarchical structure, in fact, that protects the church is that if you have kind of some bad apples at the top, they're not going to be there permanently. And so shouldn't you be trying to put people in places as priests and things like this and moving better people into the church so that this thing kind of works itself out? I mean, that's how most hierarchical institutions work in every aspect, not just in the church.
I think that it's a fair argument to a fault. And what I mean by that is that it can happen the way you're saying, and historically does happen the way you're saying in general. However, and this is a big however, what will invariably happen, especially when heresy begins to take hold, forgive me if I'm interrupting myself, but Zen, you're kind of vibrating like the reverse flash on my screen. I don't know if anyone's noticed that, or it's just my
Just
phone.
your,
Okay.
it's just
Just
you.
my
Yeah.
just my really weird phone. Okay. Anyway, the point is that this is kind of entertaining, but in any case, okay, I'm getting distracted. But the point, there he goes. We're back to normal. Okay. The point is that what will eventually happen is you will see the formation of parallel hierarchies, one of the Orthodox and one of the heretics. This is what always happens. And this happened with the Nestorian controversy. This happened with the Monophysite controversy. And these groups fall away from Orthodoxy. The Orthodox faith then remains with the hierarchy that maintains the Orthodox teaching. In the situation that we're describing here in America, for example, as I mentioned, I use the word pipeline because they have the specific type of people that they want to continue the succession of what they're teaching. In other words, there is in fact an ecumenist hierarchy and pipeline that is self-replicating at this point. The ecumenical patriarch can never be redeemed, save a nuclear bomb hitting the Fanar and everyone dying. And that's a horrible thing to say. But the point is, every person in the Fanar is committed to ecumenism. There is no way it gets better unless everybody dies and somehow people get in, which again is impossible as long as they continue the pipeline from Holy Cross, to change the situation. So in other words, it can happen. You can have a Saint Meletius, you can have a Saint Gennadius Scholarios, etc. But in order to have that, there has to be at least those people who can do that.
Yeah, but when you say that there's a parallel hierarchy, you also
Mhm.
created a parallel hierarchy.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you did. That's what happened when you moved away from the Orthodox body. So it seems
Well,
like
we
you're
would say
guilty.
we would say that they moved away from the Orthodox body.
Well, I get it. I understand that that's how you would frame it, but
Right.
it seems like your argument is mostly attributed to yourself. So you're saying, listen, these people who are not in line with the church values, the reason that this can never get better is because they made a parallel hierarchy, but you yourself are guilty of making a parallel hierarchy, which is not in line. So it's like, which one of you is right?
It's a fair question. But I think that when you study the history of the matter, and there's a lot to cover, and I'd be glad to go over some of it with you. But when you study the history of Orthodoxy in the 20th century, you can clearly see a concerted effort towards ecumenism and modernism. At the same time, unfortunately, this occurred during a period of massive civil war throughout the Orthodox world, including in Russia, where millions of people were killed and much of the church had to go underground. In that time period, say what people call the Old Calendarists or the true Orthodox of Greece were almost universally respected by the Patriarch of Jerusalem, by those in Russia, by those in Serbia, by those. So it was a completely different scenario. In other words, the Orthodox world at the beginning of this actually was in favor of the true Orthodox of Greece. And it wasn't until constant movements, sometimes by Five Eyes governments, sometimes by other governments, co-opted individual hierarchies. And there's a geopolitical aspect to this too that we're not even touching. It was no less than Henry Kissinger who basically said if the Orthodox Church survives, the future of the world is completely in doubt. There's a reason for that. And that is because of the fact that Orthodoxy is so powerful, it can restart societies, and has, because it has seen the rise and fall of societies over the centuries. But if the globalists want to do something different and they want to create something else, they have to undermine and subvert Orthodoxy.
Yeah, but if you're moving into the geopolitical sphere, what makes the Orthodox Church so powerful is its unification and the fact that it's not a body which is based around these kinds of schisms. So when these types of schisms happen, they seem to be on a very small scale. So I have them kind of documented here. You can tell me if my timeline is incorrect.
Sure.
From 1937, we have a split into Matthewites and Floronites. 1958, the Matthewites split, one group consisting of 10 bishops, the other group being 3 bishops. 1974, the Floronites split, one group under, and I mean, this just goes on and on and on, the amount of different splits that happen. So these are very fractured groups. I can't get any data on the numbers, no details on how many there actually are. It could be some of these bodies are as small as 20,000 people. I don't know. And so the question becomes, if you're looking at this as a geopolitical issue, what gives people in politics political power is always going to be numbers. So what gives Orthodoxy specifically a huge amount of political power, especially inside of the European nations, is that this is the one unified body spread over all of these different lands. So they can do communication and they can do societal wide, what would you call it? Almost propaganda, even though that has a negative connotation, together as a unified body. How is schism going to help that? It doesn't seem to have helped that. Doesn't seem to be making those inroads or those moves.
What if I told you that the knowledge of Orthodoxy's geopolitical power has been known for the better part of a century, and that governments have been trying to co-opt and have been successfully co-opting Orthodoxy for the past? I
completely agree. I would just concede that point because it's 100% accurate. I've researched it out myself. Of course, there's infiltrators all over the place. Communists have used Orthodox, all sorts of infiltrators for
CIA,
for the LGBTQ.
You
sure,
you name it.
So they use the same infrastructure against it. I understand, but the thing is like you can't. This begs an entirely new question, which is, if there's this type of corruption, external and internal, we still need to know what our threshold point is. What's our break point? When do we decide to leave? And I still don't feel like I'm any closer to an answer here on this.
That's fair. And it's not an answer that can be easily made, especially, I mean, I don't know how long you have been Orthodox. What I do know is that when somebody does convert to Orthodoxy, it is a deeply spiritual and emotional experience. So for me to come in and say, oh, by the way, your church is corrupted by ecumenism is shocking. I do not expect to end this debate with you saying, that's it, Deacon Joseph, I'm becoming true Orthodox tomorrow. I don't expect that. And that's not realistic and it's not fair.
No, but I do have the expectation, though, at the end of the debate, that even if we don't see eye to eye on this, we can have continuous conversations, between everybody, so that we can try to get to the heart of some of this. Because,
absolutely,
man, it's a big question, and I don't feel like we're making the inroads necessary to answer or solve it.
Right, and I apologize. I'll keep trying, but
go ahead.
The point is that when we start talking about, and this is where it gets a little crazy, when we start talking about infiltration of the hierarchy, and we start talking about basically governments trying to infiltrate so that they can corrupt or manipulate the hierarchy of this country, that country, because almost every country we're seeing it now. Ultimately, I mean, we don't even have to talk about Ukraine. That's kind of obvious. But the point
and
is
we can't
that
on YouTube anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they're so draconian. You can't.
I hope I didn't just ruin something.
No, you didn't.
No,
you didn't.
fine,
It'll be fine. But just so you understand, like for the future reference. So right. I'm not even disputing that. The situation in Ukraine is a nightmare, this and that. But the thing is that why is it a nightmare, though? It's a nightmare because the government there is creating a fake schism, a false fake schism. The government in Ukraine is literally doing that at gunpoint.
To actually make it a little bit more accurate, to be fair, there was a schism in the Ukrainian church known as the Ukrainian Orthodox Autocephalous Church. This has been a movement that had 3 or 4 parts. It's been well known. But the point is, the man that was kind of in charge, Filaret Denisenko, he actually came in. He was originally from the Moscow Patriarchate. And then he switched sides, decided to take over for the Ukrainian Autocephalous Church. So this is we're talking 20 years ago. But this is now coming to a head now because the organization that he formed effectively was the same organization as the OCU, which is what the Patriarch of Constantinople approved of in 2018. This was done with no small amount of money. This was done with a lot of support from the CIA. Now, why would the CIA be interested in creating a schism in Ukraine. It doesn't make sense unless we start looking at the bigger picture. Because if we look at what's happening in Ukraine, I can show you history videos of the same thing happening in Romania 75, 80 years ago. The same thing happening in Greece 40, 50, 60 years ago. The same thing happening in Russia. You already know about Russia. I don't even have to. But the point is, I can go down the list and show how hierarchies have been corrupted by state actors, nefarious state actors, I might add, with the agenda of effectively demolishing the Orthodox Church. And their reason is, frankly, very simple. Because as long as Orthodoxy exists, they can't bring in their New World Order.
So I don't. Again, though, I would just go ahead and concede some of this ground.
Yeah.
That it's not. And by the way, the concession is going to go across the board. It's not just an infiltration of the Orthodox Church. It's an infiltration of Protestant churches globally. It's an infiltration of everything which is religious, which has any form of refutation towards the message. Okay. So that's just the truth. You know what the message is. I don't need to explain it to you. Everybody in the audience knows what the message is. I don't need to explain it to them either. So the thing is, though, is that regardless of that, if you don't have one unified church to stand against that, what do you have?
Okay. It's a fair, again, I hate repeating myself and saying it's a fair point, but as I mentioned in the beginning of this debate, normal heresies, like, say, Nestorianism or Arianism, cause massive schism and confusion often throughout the global Orthodox world. We are now dealing with not only a pan-heresy, one that combines all the other heresies together, but also we're dealing with hostile state actors across the world. So this is Orthodoxy's, for lack of a better term, biggest opponent yet. And it's been 100 years of fighting. Now, if a regular heresy can cause mass confusion and division, etc., I mean, you're talking about it at scale. We're talking about just massive correction. And yes, now you did point out the Catholics and the Protestants and other groups have also been compromised. One difference, and it was a difference from that first debate, Canon 15. Because as soon as corrupting influences enter the church, whether it's just a simple heresy, whether it's the pan-heresy of ecumenism, as soon as something like that happens, the faithful are called to flee to bishops who still preach the truth. That is how it's a failsafe. And this is something that I've actually...
But there are still bishops who preach the truth. Even there still are. You can't even refute that that's true. Of course, there still are.
Can you name 5 that reject ecumenism?
Well, that
3.
Well,
I just need 3.
So you want 3 that say that you don't want to be ecumenist? I don't know who they are, but it would necessitate or facilitate, unless you're making the affirmative statement, all bishops in the Orthodox Church are accepting of ecumenism. Are you actually making that affirmative statement? Because that requires huge proof. That's a huge claim.
Would you be mad if I did?
I want proof that all of them, that every bishop, that's a huge claim on your part, man.
It'll take me a while, but I can. And I'm not saying every bishop in Orthodoxy. I'm saying every bishop in World Orthodoxy. That may be a shocker, but I'm gonna try. I wasn't kind of expecting this line of questioning, but it's very interesting. But it can easily be done. We'll have to work backwards. The most visible and clearly anti-ecumenical group.
Just to hang on, I don't mean to cut you off, but when you say World Orthodoxy, I just want to make sure we get the definition of that correct. Mm-hmm. What do you mean is the distinction between? Do you just mean the distinction between what I know as Orthodoxy and true Orthodoxy, or do you mean something different?
Let me put it to you this way. The term canonical Orthodoxy is only about 25 years old, but they mean the same thing.
Okay, so the way that I framed it, do you have a dispute with the way I framed it? Did I do something incorrectly from your perspective?
No, I was just
okay.
simplifying.
Okay, gotcha. So then if that's the claim, it's huge. It's a huge claim that you're making.
I am aware. Well, that's part of the reason why I'm pretty sure it has been very, very difficult to even appear on a show like this. darn near impossible. A lot of people don't want to talk about it because it leads to a lot of conclusions that scare the daylights out of people. I've argued with.
I want to talk about it.
Yeah, I know, and I'm excited to too. But like to give you an idea, like I was once trying to help some Roman Catholic apologist become Orthodox, so on and so forth. He refused. He became like steadfast, like the Pope is right no matter what. He could like say Hail Satan and he would still be with the Pope. But the point is, he just became that obtuse about it. But in an interview I saw later with him on a show, on one of these Catholic shows, his interviewer asked him, "Is there anything you can say you've learned about Orthodoxy that's positive?" And he said, "I'll be honest with you, it's the fact that their nature is so decentralized that even if you think you've destroyed them, they can come right back." This is what terrifies people about Orthodoxy, which is why they need it compromised. Because as long as it's operating in its normal state, in its pure defense of the true faith, it's virtually indestructible until the Antichrist. But the point is, until the Antichrist, virtually indestructible. It's like whack-a-mole. So the point is, the communists thought they could destroy it in Russia. They couldn't because of the Catacomb Church. But the Catacomb Church was heavily persecuted. The new calendarists tried to destroy the old calendarists, but the Serbians came in to help them and things like that. It's so decentralized and out there and wacky in some ways that even if in the midst of the chaos, it will always reform itself. And maybe you might lose a patriarchate, you might lose a see, you might lose a big cathedral church, but the church always stays the same, even if you lose some buildings. So that's kind of the thing that happens with Orthodoxy throughout the world. And this is the very reason why the globalists hate Orthodoxy. Because as long as Orthodoxy exists in its pure form, it can still retake society. And we're at that decisive.
Well, there's some things you're smuggling in there. Like, for instance, you say in its pure form. Like, I don't know what you're trying to say with in its pure form. Do you believe that you are the pure form? The true Orthodox is the pure form? Because yes, again, so that's a really bold claim again. So you're kind of baking into your hypothetical here already that you're the true form of Orthodoxy. And so this has yet to even be established yet that you're the true form. But on top of that, in order for you to make this claim that you are, you seem to have baked in also that every single bishop is heretical inside of everything that isn't true Orthodoxy. And I still haven't seen any evidence for this.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to it because the nature of the question is so big.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So I had to give some context. I will try to use the most obvious example because the hardest argument is usually the one you need to break down the others. And that would be the example of the Russian Church abroad. As you're aware, the Russian Church abroad under the Moscow Patriarchate joined in 2007. You might also be aware that in 1983, when they weren't in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, they issued an anathema known as the anathema against ecumenism. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not. I'm actually pulling it up so I can kind of read.
Oh, this is good. You know why? Because this is what I want you to do. I want you to pull up 1983 anathema against ecumenism.
Okay. I'm with you.
By the way, we're working off a phone, so if you can share your screen, because I don't even know how to do that here.
Yeah, no, I understand. Is this the Rokor's anathema against ecumenism?
Yeah, but you want the 1983 one specifically.
Yeah, I've got the 1983. I have it.
Okay. Yeah, if you could, can you read that out for us, please?
Yeah, I can. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull my screen over here. I just want to make sure that I have it correct. 1 second. So the Council of Bishops 1983 was a most special council whose distinctiveness lay in its modesty and inconspicuousness. This was, of course, the first time in the history of our church that a council had been held at a holy transfiguration. What are the points that I'm looking for here that make kind of make
you're looking for the anathema itself. It's a simple paragraph. It should start to
those who attack the Church of Christ by teaching that Christ's church is divided into so-called branches. Is that what you're after?
Yeah.
Okay. So what this says is those who attack the Church of Christ by teaching that Christ's church is divided into so-called branches, which differ in doctrine and way of life, or that the church does not exist visibly, but will be formed in the future when all branches or sects, denominations, and even religions will be united into one body, and who do not distinguish the priesthood and mysteries of the church from those of the heretics, but say that the baptism and Eucharist of heretics is effectual for salvation. Therefore, to those who knowingly have communion with these aforementioned heretics, or who advocate, disseminate, or defend their new heresy of ecumenism under the pretext of brotherly love, or the supposed unification of separated Christian and anathema. That's what it says.
Anathema, yeah.
Mhm.
So basically, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you'll notice, and I'm going to have to pull up the text here, but at least we're working with the same text here. So I'm going to see if I can, get the new anathema. Hold on one moment.
Sure.
It's in one of my chats. This is important. Before Rocor joined with the Moscow Patriarchate, there was a question: how could Rocor join the Moscow Patriarchate if the Moscow Patriarchate is officially involved in ecumenism? It would be impossible. In fact, in 2001, you can even find a deposition by Bishop Gabriel of the Rocor on YouTube, where he explains, well, the anathema would have to be thrown away because otherwise we'd fall under it. And so that was the basic position. But let me see if I can pull this up in history here, because basically what happened was this. It kind of all went quiet. The whole thing went quiet about the anathema against ecumenism. In 2000, and I remember this well, 2001, I believe it was, a new anathema against ecumenism was written. And it was longer, like a lot longer, and included like Freemasons and so on and so forth. And you may be wondering why I'm bringing this up. Hold on. The reason why is because the text inexplicably became much, much longer, and nobody understood why. And now, give me just a moment. I will explain. If we go to the Jordanville version of the anathemas on the Sundays of Orthodoxy, if you can type in, Google in Jordanville anathema, and that should pull it up as the first response.
Okay.
So, okay, great. Well, if we go down to it's a 10-page PDF. It's a 10-page PDF. You go down to 13-page PDF, and you go to page 10. Now, if you look, these three in the middle that start with "to the Theosophists" and then "to the blasphemers," these were all combined into one anathema, and it wasn't clear why. Nobody understood why they were suddenly talking about Theosophists and Masons and occultists. There was no idea what was happening until after the union, because now it still looks like you have the ecumenists, right? They're there on the third paragraph. What did they change? Once you look at it in the Jordanville version, you can actually see that there's a line missing. And that line specifically, and I can pull up the 1980, I have to pull up the 1983 anathema, is incredibly important. That line,
what's that line?
Is, as you probably have both of them now, those who knowingly have communion with these aforementioned heretics. That line was taken out. But nobody noticed because they just shoved all this text in, this giant wall of text, but they had taken out knowingly have communion with the aforementioned heretics, thus opening the door to communion with ecumenists, because officially it was no longer in the anathema.
Yeah, but so I'm looking at these two documents, and in the Jordan document, it does appear that they actually expanded the definition for what ecumenism even was. And then massively expanded it, in fact. Now, you can quibble kind of over this line or split hairs over the line, but the thing is it does seem like it's pushing an anti-ecumenism message, regardless of that line being in there.
Right.
That seems like it's splitting hairs quite a bit.
Here's the reason it's important. Because as long as you keep the line, those who knowingly have communion with those aforementioned heretics, you cannot be in communion with people who follow ecumenism. So in other words, They had to remove that line, and it was done in a really sloppy manner that, to be quite honest, even most true Orthodox didn't even figure out. They were like, why are they just making this gigantic thing? But it was not what they added, it was what they removed. And nobody
but
noticed
this seems
it.
like such a bizarre argument to me, because the Jordan document greatly expands on what this heresy and ecumenism is. Why would the intent of that to be to go ahead and be ecumenist then? That doesn't even make sense.
Because as long as you're not condemning the ecumenists directly in the hierarchy, which is what the anathema is supposed to do to begin with, you don't fall under it. So if, in other words, if the original anathema says you can't even commune with ecumenists, then for all intents and purposes, if you commune with an ecumenist, it's okay as long as it's not in the text. However, with it in the text, it becomes obvious that you can't commune, say, for example, with the Moscow Patriarchate. Now, that's the most recent example. And I'm bringing this up because that is a very specific
Deacon, that's extremely far-fetched. That, on the one hand, you're saying they took out the lines so this way they could move towards ecumenism, but on the other hand, they greatly expanded the definition to be inclusive of things that weren't even included in the 83. That seems like it's hair splitting to a degree. You can't possibly justify your schism based on this, or the schism based on this. Could you?
Well, certainly I wouldn't judge the entire world's division based on that. That's not what I was trying to do.
Okay.
I was trying to make an example specifically with ROCOR. But since you brought it up, it actually has relevant application. Because as I mentioned, when ROCOR went into union with Moscow, even though they're referred to as functionally autonomous, and I brought this up with the case of Father Peter Heers, when it comes down to it, Moscow still has to rubber stamp every decision. This was proven with the Havana Declaration in 2016. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Apparently in 2016, Patriarch Kirill went to Cuba and secretly met with Pope Francis. And they created this joint document, and they had like the photos taken. Everyone was in shock. There was so much shock in the Russian press that, in fact, leaders of the seminaries, a couple of bishops, hundreds of students literally were like, we're no longer commemorating the Patriarch. This is unacceptable.
Okay.
And everyone turned, because now they're in communion with the ROCOR, everyone turned to the ROCOR because they figured they'd be anti-ecumenists. They totally support them. They said nothing. And at that point, many people in Russia actually said, we've been betrayed. ROCOR isn't even ROCOR anymore. This is the anti-ecumenism they taught us, and now they won't even stand up for us. And eventually all those people were either removed, or they got, deposed, or they got kicked out of this. In other words, all the protesters were taken out because ROCOR couldn't do anything, just like they can't do anything with Father Peter. Ultimately, it has to, and I think that it's funny to say, but I think part of the reason is because Father Peter might have used the 83 anathema, which literally exposes the problem of the current anathema. But I'm using that as the most recent example to demonstrate that before the 2000 anathema, ROCOR recognized you couldn't be in communion with open ecumenists. And after, they realized that if they did, they'd fall under their own anathema. And I was around during that time.
That just doesn't look, listen, it doesn't look like that to me. Like, I'm reading both documents, and you can bring up kind of these isolated incidences, which I understand why you're doing that, because it helps kind of propel your point. But this is not a global phenomenon of which you're bringing up.
Oh, it's for instance, a Russian phenomenon.
Yeah. So, for instance, in this, I understand that you have an issue with this line. Do I think that this second document would be better with a line? Yeah, I don't know, probably. But it seems like, on the one hand, they really, and I mean greatly expanded this. Again, this is kind of my argument back to you, is they expanded what they consider heresy significantly to include Masons, to include all kinds of things, to include theosophy. This is gold. This is gold. But you're kind of hinging everything on this one. Why in the world would they expand those just in order to go and be engaged with them? That's just, come on, man. That's so far-fetched.
It sounds far-fetched until you realize that since then, it's been okay to be in communion with people who, might be Masons or Theosophists, etc. And they're still okay as long as they're within the hierarchy, the formal hierarchy of the church.
Well, I mean, they're not communing with with theosophists. They're not like going and doing sacraments with theosophists, right?
I don't know. I mean, this may shock you, and I know that this is showing my age, but 20 years ago, in the Orthodox Word, the diocesan publication of the Antiochians, almost half the obituaries, I would say, would list, when priests died, would list their Masonic rank. This is public documentation. So the point is, and by the way, the Freemasons were anathematized by the new calendarists in 1930.
Yeah, but hang on. But to be fair, to kind of shoot back at that argument, I myself was a Freemason once, years and years ago, and I left Freemasonry, right? But if I died, I would be part of their rolls as well. But that wouldn't make me a Freemason. Yeah.
I thought they had fees.
Well, they have dues, but you never drop off the rolls.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so you have to be, like, you got to be very cautious when you say, like, hey, all these people who died, it showed their rank in Mason. That doesn't mean that they were Masons. In fact,
I mean,
you know,
I understand where you're coming from, and I would hate to feel like, I don't want you to feel like I'm judging you for this, but the point is, I'm talking about, if you take, for example, ROCOR's Father Andrew Phillips, or he used to be with ROCOR, now he's with the Moscow Patriarchate. He quite frankly stated that the reason he wasn't elevated to the priesthood until he moved to the church abroad was because his bishop told him that he would refuse to elevate him further than deacon unless he was a Freemason. So, I mean, I can pull up anecdotal evidence. That's not.
But that's just what it is. It's anecdotal.
Right. It is. But the point I'm trying to make is that, again, we're simply talking about specifically Russia. Now, if
and to address this in chat real quick, I'm sorry to cut you off, sir, but just to address this in chat real quick, it is possible now to get them to drop you from the rolls. So that's what I did. I had them drop you from the rolls, but that wasn't always possible. That's part of their secret oaths. You know, they're screwballs, right? They're screwy people. And you don't even know what it is until you're in it for a couple of years. You know, you don't even know. So the thing is, though, is like, look, you know, kind of back to this so that you understand that is anecdotal evidence, one, and two, bringing up that, hey, this group over here, which, by the way, is in a heavy area for Freemasons, I must admit, that's many of them had a Freemasonic rank, which would be rank 3, probably Master Mason or above that. That's very easy to attain. That's like only a 6 to 1 year process, right? And achieving even what you would consider high ranks can be done within the span of just a year or two. So I got to take that with kind of a grain of sand, because even if it says what their rank is, it's very plausible to me that while that was set, that they weren't actually Masons when they died.
And that's fair. I mean, I can understand where you would be. You have, first off, you have every right to be skeptical of my claims. Yeah. Second off, you have every right to be skeptical of anecdotal evidence, depending on, but when it comes right down to it, the simple reality is that this is not one or two things. I'm giving a few examples from one specific local church, and that's the Church of Russia. I can do that again with almost every.
Well, I understand that you're framing your narrative in your worldview, and I appreciate that.
But it's also a very big narrative.
I agree. Look, I agree, but kind of every point that you bring up, though, I do have to take into consideration if that even falls in the framework of your worldview. And so I kind of, as we're going through this, there's kind of still a couple of big major things that are hanging out there, which is thus far the evidence presented has mostly been anecdotal. You have presented some text evidence, but haven't tied it into a global phenomenon of ecumenism. And then lastly, we have not been able to tie in that every bishop in the modern Orthodox church is ecumenist. That just seems like a ridiculous claim.
It's a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But I brought that one up because it is the most recent example, and because it is such a subtle thing. I could have just jumped to 1965 and said when Athenagoras and Pope Paul VI started calling themselves brothers, and they started putting the Pope first in the taxis of Constantinople. I could have done that. But the problem with that is that doesn't, most people now, I've noticed, a lot of people, especially because a lot of people are coming to ROCOR for this, and they're trying to get away from Constantinople because they're starting to realize it is really heretical and basically a puppet of the CIA. And so on and so forth. They've had enough of it, and I get that. But had we had this discussion 10 years ago, which would never have happened because of the fact that I never would have been allowed on. Not by you, but I'm saying the point is these things would have been much broader and wilder. The 1983 anathema was in response to the 1983 Assisi meeting, where representatives of Orthodox, Catholics, Assyrians, Muslims, Jews, pagan religions, so on and so forth, were meeting in Assisi for a massive worldwide conference to do joint prayer and to claim that they were all one world and one religion. So this is stuff that has been going on. And I just jumped through 3 different historical eras here, 65, 83, and 2016, not because I'm trying to create a narrative thread, but simply just to explain the huge scope of what we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And just to again concede some ground, maximum good faith, I do not disagree with you that there is a problem in modern Orthodoxy. I've researched it myself. So has my wife. I've talked to various priests about it. I've even talked to a bishop about it. Of course, ecumenism can be problematic. And there's many times when traditionalists, or what are called even rigorists, are even shamed for pointing that out. I understand that that's an issue. I understand that that's a problem, but that still ends up begging the question of how many of these bishops must be. And if you say that all of them are corrupted by this, I still need to see that kind of significant evidence of you pointing this out. And if that's not something that you're prepared to have today, I understand that because it is huge, but just so you understand, I do want to see that.
Right. Okay. So let me see if I can help assist, because this is where it's going to get weird. One of the things that, in order to provide the documentary evidence, you have to take into account the role of the World Council of Churches. Why are they there? Why are the majority of Orthodox churches part of the World Council of Churches? What kind of agreed statements have they made? How many bishops have signed on? Were they representative of all their synods? Joint statements. Were they representative of all their synods? Like I mentioned in the last debate, the joint statement in Damascus between the Monophysites and the Orthodox. How many of them are synodically approved? Once you start doing that, keeping in mind that the hierarchy of world Orthodoxy has something like, what is it? Is it 17 patriarchates, I believe it is? Or is it 17 major and I forget what it is exactly, because some of them are brand new.
We can pull it up if you think the specifics are necessary.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is this, that if you can demonstrate that synodally, all of these churches have been involved and they have agreed to joint statements with heterodox, they have agreed to effectively the principles of ecumenism, which is that of the invisible church and that of a future union of churches.
I feel like that's guilt by association.
Well, no, the bishop represents the church. How can you say that?
Yeah, but what I mean by guilt by association is, like, you can't say that in order to keep this framework whole, that you're not going to, like, speak out against this other bishop or something like that. That doesn't mean that they themselves are engaging in the practice of ecumenism. That's also ridiculous.
Oh, well, I didn't say that. But what I would say is that even if they may privately disagree, they tacitly, publicly agree with the official position of their church. I think that that's fair. I
don't know that it's tacit agreement to just not denounce, because maybe they're doing this behind closed doors, which I'm told happens often. That most of this happens behind closed doors. And I'm sure within true Orthodoxy, a lot of your problems with clergy, you don't bring him right to the forefront with parishioners. You handle a lot of that behind closed doors, don't you?
Well, first off, I hate to say this, and this is just my position, because there are many true Orthodox who disagree with me. They would more agree with you that some of this stuff belongs behind closed doors. I've run a news website for 19 years. I am actually not a fan of things behind closed doors. I like things out in the open because of the fact that when they're out in the open, they're accountable.
But sometimes there's a necessary facilitation where you could have something that is being so rigorously debated that you don't want to cause any type of panic, or you don't want to cause any type of problems with the parishioners themselves. So there may be really good reason for some of the hierarchies to discuss some things behind closed doors for good reason. Like, for instance, the infiltration that we were talking about. You might not want to just go right out to your parishioners and go, you know what, guys, the CIA offered us a huge bag of money because they're infiltrating our church. That might not be the best idea for like a lot of reasons. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know that I would necessarily say that the hierarchy must convene in front of the parishioners at all times, but I do know that they have these discussions even behind the scenes about ecumenism. So it seems to me like it's impossible that all of them are involved in it.
You see, now the very fact that they're having I would counter that the very fact that they're having these discussions based on what you're saying, but nothing is actually happening based on the public result, means that most likely it is because they support ecumenism. Otherwise, they would have done something by now.
Well, this is a huge body. It's a slow moving machine. It's like a government. Governments are these big, giant, slow moving machines. But once they get moving, once something's set in stone, then you start to see kind of this massive trickle down effect. But it's always a slow moving machine. Any type of hierarchical body, be it a church, be it a state, be it a localized government, is a big, giant, slow-moving machine. I mean, when you went to go get a zone, if you've ever gone to get a zoning permit, that wasn't a one-day process, right? I mean, it takes months to have inspectors come out and this and that, because whenever you work within a hierarchy, it's just the way things are done.
Well, I mean, I would argue that I think that that's not really that true in Orthodoxy. I understand what you're saying about monolithic establishment, etc. But in Orthodoxy, there's still that centrality of a bishop. Whether we like it or not, every single primate of whichever church you believe in or are a member of is most likely going to be celebrating on a cathedral on Sunday. You can most likely say hello to him, take a blessing, and shake his hand that day. You could do that in Constantinople right now. You could do that in Moscow right now. The point is,
you can do that with the president of the United States right now, but that doesn't mean
the Secret Service might stop.
Well, no, I mean, if he's out doing an event or something this, you know what I mean? You can go shake his hand. I'm just saying, like, the bigger an organization is, the longer it takes for anything to get done. The vastness of what you call world orthodoxy versus true orthodoxy, I'm sure it's much easier for you guys to get things done because it's a way smaller organization.
Okay, that's a good point. We can talk about the difficulty of bureaucracy in terms of relative size, because the fact that we get things done quickly, it may be a function of size, but I've also seen things that took years to fix. So the point is, and that's not because of size, it's simply because of intransigence. If people don't want to agree on something, and there's a question of potential heresy, then it can become a really messy situation. And I'm talking about clear, definable heresies. But the idea that the bishops can't do anything, I mean, quickly is ludicrous. I mean, if you piss the bishops off enough as a clergyman, you say the wrong speech, it's not gonna take a week for you to get removed.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying individual actors can't move very quickly. Even inside of hierarchical structures, individual actors can do this. But if you're making structure-wide changes, that takes a long time. And it takes a long time in any organization. You work at a factory, and just having a new SOP implemented will take weeks. You know, I mean, none of it is fast moving when you're dealing with a hierarchy. You're necessarily dealing with bureaucracy. Correct. And in this particular case, even within, I'm sure, true orthodoxy, just like what you call world orthodoxy, within world orthodoxy, you still have internal politics, and internal politics means a lot. I mean, people are still vying for position. People are still, I mean, there's still like kind of the dark end of that, which happens again.
How it's intrigue.
Yeah. Well, of course. And well, the thing is you're not going to be any more immune from that than they are. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Oh, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to pretend that I am.
Right.
If I was to do that, I would be lying to you. If I was like, oh yes, true orthodoxy is organizationally perfect, then yes, you could just write me off, because that is not honest. Are there people like that in true orthodoxy? Yes. Am I like that? No, because I've been through the mess of bureaucracy and difficulties in terms of hierarchy. I get that. I'm not going to sell you I'm not going to sell you, a bridge in Brooklyn. I
Sure.
know that even if somehow this marginally convinced you to look into true orthodoxy, I do not want to give you the impression that it's going to be nice. It's going to be most of the things people complain about in orthodoxy are still there. So yeah, your fast is still long. Your prayers are long. They might actually be longer. There's no chairs. We just don't do that. That's just not there. Now we have chairs sometimes. We have like the benches on the back, but we don't. No pews. We're like nope. So basically, everything that people don't like about orthodoxy that makes it hard is actually worse with us. So I don't want to sell you on the idea that things are better.
I understand. I'm just, I guess we're kind of still in this infinite loop then. And I don't really know where we go,
Okay.
From here
What I would suggest is this. And I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm giving you homework or lecturing or anything.
Give me the homework.
All right. What I want you to do is I want you to see if you can get your hands on a book called Orthodoxy and the Ecumenical Movement by Father George Macris. That's Macris. It is a collection of the main ecumenical documents that were issued not only by Constantinople, but hierarchies of different churches in World Orthodoxy, agreements made with the WCC. So not too thick. It basically covers the period from 1920 to 1969. Since then, there have been loads more, but that one's a good one to start just to get an idea of how you see the change. In Evanston, for example, in 1954, when you look at the Orthodox statement to the WCC, it sounds exactly like what they're talking about now when you hear about people talking about good ecumenism. We're the church. We want to make sure that, everyone joins the church and you have to be part of the church. Those are completely Orthodox statements. It's after that, however, that all of a sudden the statements start changing. They start talking about our common Lord between our churches. It becomes a movement from we are the Orthodox Church to the church is there somewhere. And once you start seeing that change, you can't unsee it. You begin realizing in more agreed statements and more agreed documents all over the world, most of them in English, hundreds of them, it's all there. And eventually the names start becoming more and more familiar. They start becoming people people you've read, people you've respected. You might see a hierarch's name who you're talking about, and you're like, how could he say this? It's a massive, massive jump.
Well, then here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to revisit this again and do a round two. I'll go and I'll look at what you think I need to research to either affirm or not affirm your position. But next time, I'd like you to bring the evidence that's required to kind of back up this statement that all bishops
of world
are engaging,
are
engaging in ecumenism.
Are either A, ecumenist, or B, tacitly in agreement with them. That's
so
a hard statement.
It is.
And the fact that, I don't know, but I got the feeling you were like kind of upset because that implication was in the last debate, but I didn't actually state it directly. But I think you might have felt, I think some of the people in the audience felt it because they're like, is he saying we're not Orthodox? No, what I'm saying is way worse, is that you're Orthodox under bishops who are lying to you. And it's just going to take a lot to prove. It's a lot to ask, is my point. I get it.
It is a big ask, and it's a big statement. Now, I'm willing, like I said, logic and politics is I love reading, and I'm willing to dive into any of the literature.
This is going to be your wheelhouse.
But I have to tell you right now, thus far in this debate, and I'll actually leave this as my closing statement. I'm totally unconvinced, totally and completely unconvinced. I don't think that logically you've demonstrated why anybody should schism away from the church at all, or even given us any parameters under which we should. And that's it's disappointing to say the least from my perspective.
Okay. Deacon, you want to just make this your closing statement? And then
I think I can. I think that's it's kind of interesting that you said that, because one of the things that I have been trying to establish throughout this debate, and I think I've at least established it, how do I put this, theoretically, is that there is a schism between two bodies. Both of them claim to be the church.
Right.
but only one of them can be.
That's correct.
The question,
Law of
the
excluded
question-
middle. Only one can be true.
Right, exactly. Now, based on this, what the question is, when to leave the church, as I said in the beginning, is never, because of the fact that if the bishops are in heresy, they left the church. I don't have to leave the church because they left. I just cannot be under them. Had I had more time, I would have gone into the response to Nestorius at Constantinople.
Yeah, but I believe that what you're doing right now is just it's framing. So you can say that you haven't left the church, but certainly World Orthodoxy thinks that you have. So this is a perspective difference and a framing difference.
Well,
it's like
I mean,
you say, "Well, I haven't left the church. I'm still part of the church." It's like, well, not from their perspective, you're not.
Well, yeah, except for the fact that I might find them believable if they weren't descended from people who tried to kill us. But because they're descended from people who tried to kill us, I do not find their claims particularly convincing. So I think that's fair.
I mean, if we can end up demonstrating that, I think that would be a fair argument too.
Lots of history we got a lot of history to do.
Yeah, you can send over whatever resources you want, and we can revisit.
I don't have your email.
Yeah, we'll get in touch through.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'll try to send you a comprehensive list of stuff.
So,
at least for a start.
If I could step in, I think the debate portion is pretty much over. You guys kind of said your piece for now. The question I have, and I think it's fair, and I saw somebody in chat saying, seems like the Ortho Bros have all these inner, churchian problems that don't really get worked out the way that he sees fit. So he's like, I'm going to go explore Eastern Catholicism because at least they have some, head honcho that can declare what's true and what's correct and, what's anathema. And, if you go against him, you're automatically wrong, the Pope. So if you're both, I think it's a fair question, like from a Catholic perspective, if somebody says, well, Andrew's over here declaring that his team is the true church and that Deacon Joseph, you guys are the ones that left. And then Deacon Joseph is just saying the inverse. But neither of you have this like ex cathedra declaration that you can make. So the question to both of you is, how do you actually determine who is the true church? Who's the true Orthodox church? So,
okay. Did you want to go first or should I?
Well, I think I would say that while history would play obviously a huge and important role in that, and I don't think that Deacon Joseph would disagree that that's true. I don't think, though, that Deacon Joseph says that what he calls global orthodoxy doesn't share the same history as true orthodoxy, because it necessarily would. So I think the demonstration, though, is always going to have to be on the people who are schisming or breaking away, just like it was on the Protestants and just like it was on Rome. I think the burden of proof is on them for why it is the church, which he agrees was already established, why they need to break away from that. That I think that the burden, the impetus is on him to do that.
I would say that the fact that you have two parallel groups of people declaring themselves to be the church, something that has occurred in every period of heresy in history, is the greatest proof that A, the Holy Spirit moves within the church through fallible humans, and somehow everybody keeps it together. Somehow, even though we can argue about minutiae and very important minutiae about the hierarchies in question, we all agree on the same councils. We all agree on the same teachings. Our churches basically look the same. Our fasts are the same. 75% of Andrew's official church is on the same calendar as we are. Our agreement easily outweighs our disagreement. This, for some people, would say this looks kind of small and confused and petty. We have been that petty for 2,000 years. Now, the idea behind the papacy, well, what if we have someone to solve the disputes, was invented. It was invented in the 11th century. It's not the original way.
Right.
It's not the way the church always
Right.
did.
And we don't, well, okay. So yeah, we don't disagree on that, but who's making the accusation? You're making the accusation that this was necessary due to the fact that this church is completely corrupted with ecumenism. So
I was
so the
actually
impetus is there.
I was actually answering the questioner, who was basically an Eastern Catholic, asking, why can't we have a central authority?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. I kind of understand where Andrew's coming from, though. He's saying that he's making the claim that the history of the church is where Andrew actually still resides, and that you walked away from that. You declared that these people are doing
Vice
these things
versa.
wrong, even though
Yeah.
But you're saying it's kind of hard to like you basically what you guys did is you packed up your shit and went to another building and said this is the true Orthodox Church. I don't know what these guys are talking about. So you did make the declaration that the historical buildup to where we are now is now false.
Well, I like if we take the true Orthodox Church of Greece or Russia, I don't think it was as simple as let me pack up my ball and go home. It was
Well, sure,
more
it's an
like soldiers with
oversimplification.
machine guns said, we're going to kill you and your families if you don't leave this building so that we can use it for the Treblinka or whatever the point is. So no, my point is that it's a bit of a representation to imply that we were just like, well, you guys aren't Orthodox. Bye. No, that's not what happened. So
Right, but the grounding foundation, though, is accusation from you.
come again?
The grounding foundation is accusation from true Orthodox. The accusation is that the church
that there was a
that I am
violation.
in is at fault because they're engaging in ecumenism across the board, and all of them are guilty of this, and therefore they cannot be Orthodox. So with such a bold claim, such a ginormous claim, which requires ginormous proof, I'm definitely willing to hear it out, but there's no possible way I think we're going to get through it today.
No, no. Even if I was let me put it to you this way: just to find the subjects, we would be well over time. We're talking literally. If you want to get everything to prove every point, you're talking hundreds of documents. Which I've read hundreds of documents, and I saw.
Well, right now, I'll just stick with kind of what the core is and the demonstration of the core, and I'll be okay with that. But I mean, we're not done. We're going to do this again. I'm not going to let you. I'm not going to let you walk away from it. We're doing it again. But and I appreciate your time.
We need a trilogy.
That's right. We need a trilogy.
So, Deacon, would you say that any bishop that lays on hands to ordain a new deacon, new priest, or whatever, who is an active ecumenist, that is not a valid ordination, that whoever he ordained is not actually a priest, not actually
I really am not a fan of the term valid. We get that from Roman Catholicism, the idea of valid orders. If you take the case of St. Meletius of Antioch, this is a perfect case because he was actually the Arian party was in control at the time in terms of the churches. They controlled the buildings. People fled the buildings. St. Paulinus of Antioch was known as the Orthodox bishop, but he had no control over the state structure. But when St. Meletius was made bishop by this Arian party, he was actually secretly Orthodox. And so when he was ordained by the Arians, afterwards he came out and said, no, I profess the Orthodox faith. I believe that Christ is God, so on and so forth, which, really made the Arians that ordained him really mad and endeared many of the people in the cathedral who had gotten tired of the Arian heretics. But Paulinus of Antioch, for example, did not believe him. And actually Rome agreed with Paulinus of Antioch, which is why Rome didn't recognize the Second Ecumenical Council. So, yeah, that sort of thing can happen. But do I believe it? I believe it becomes less and less frequent with time. When you're in the midst of kind of this battle, I mean, people don't realize it, but this fight against ecumenism has been going on now for 100 years. The Pan-Orthodox Council of 1923 that caused all the chaos with the calendar was 100 years ago.
That's right.
So a lot.
That's what my research showed as well, right?
Yeah.
But this did create a chain effect of schism, which came from schism, which came from schism, which is another
right. And
kind
I
of
would argue that
loop.
But I would argue that the chain of schism works the other way, and that in fact a lot of the people are they're laboring under a misapprehension, basically. So they don't realize that they've been taught the Orthodox faith. When it comes to stuff like ecumenism, they've been taught, just don't worry about it. That's just weird. And so a lot of things got downplayed. But the basics are still there. I mean, that's why St. Alexis of Wilkes-Barre was able to convert 30,000 Uniates. They were with the Pope of Rome, and he was able to bring them back because there was still that baseline education. He just had to say, we have to return to our traditions. And they knew what those traditions were, so it worked. But that's kind of the same thing that we're dealing with now. I hope that helps.
Okay. And those of you that want to call in, I saw somebody in chat. If you want to call in and ask a question to either debater, tag me in the Discord because I don't think our mods are doing their jobs. They're on vacation or something. I'm not sure.
And by the way, I know I don't ever in debates do like the obsessive water drinking because that's annoying. I just happen to be on week 3 of carnivore diet, so I have to like oversaturate myself with water and salt. So don't, like it's not common, but this time I had to do it. Is what it is.
Either tag me or tag Moon in the Discord, and you can get a link if you want to call in. But because a lot of people a couple of people are asking, and I noticed nobody's in the back line, so the mods must not have been sending it out. So if you want to call in, get in the Discord, get your questions ready. But
that's because usually there's like a ramp down, right? And this time there just really wasn't. There was nowhere else to go with it until we reconvene, basically.
Well, so another smaller question, Deacon. So what you consider to be the true Orthodox Church are there any ecumenists that are clergymen in what you consider to be the Orthodox Church?
No.
How do you verify that? How do you know? How do you know that?
It's easy. You can just look at all our bishops. You can look at their confession of faith. You can call them, most of them. You can write them an email. Let's say here, the way the process normally works, and it kind of looks the same on paper when we're talking about my church or we're talking about, World Orthodoxy. You walk into a church. The priest starts talking about, say, that we should join with the Roman Catholics or we should join with the Protestants, so on and so forth. You, A, loudly protest, B, write your bishop, and the bishop takes care of it. Unfortunately, we know from experience that a lot of people have tried stuff like that in the official churches, and it doesn't work out well for them. It actually goes pretty badly for them. I have actually seen priests come close to getting deposed unless they publicly repented for what they did. So that's the easiest way I can say it to you, is that the proof is in the pudding. If you're saying, are there ecumenists in my church? My answer would be, prove it, and they won't last much longer.
Mm-hmm. So then last thing, wouldn't that, like, your answer to are there any ecumenists? You say no. That claim requires the same amount of proof as the claim that you make that every bishop in what Andrew considers to be the Orthodox Church is an ecumenist.
Not necessarily.
Just in the other direction.
But that's exactly. You can't have it that way. A bishop is central to the teaching of the church, whereas priests and deacons are assistants to the bishop. So if a priest is speaking heresy, it's bad. But if the bishop doesn't know about it, the church is fine. It's just one priest, and it has to be taken care of. But if the bishop is heretical, then that means all of his assistants are acting as assistants of a heretic. This is a much bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
I would concede that that's true. I think
I
would too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think the question the question that I'm asking is like, are there any ecumenists? You say no. Let's say ecumenist bishops in what you consider to be the true Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
Are there any
absolutely none?
You say no. And the answer, the reason for like how you know that is because you haven't seen the evidence. Prove that there are, right?
No, they anathematize.
That lays the burden on us, right? And that's fair. But
yeah,
when you ask Andrew, or when you make the claim to Andrew that every bishop in what we consider
that's going to require a massive amount of documentation. I'm fully aware of
it. Right. So isn't it fair for him to reject your claim in the same way that you would reject the claim that maybe there is
if he is not open to seeing the documentation, then yeah, of course it's fair for him to reject my claim. If he does see the documentation and then still rejects it, I'd be very surprised, because our confession, our public confession, is what we say and what we write. It's what we proclaim. That is our public confession. So if I have documentation of public confessions of entire synods, that's sufficient proof to say this is the belief of the synod.
By the way, I would actually have to counter with one thing to you, Zen, which is that if I'm right, then all of his bishops are ecumenists.
Come again?
If I'm correct, all of your bishops would be ecumenists because
How?
you would be in schism, and so you would be engaging in ecumenism.
I'm confused by your I missed it.
I don't know what happened, but suddenly, oh, okay, I think your video is back. I was saying if it's true, if I'm correct, and I'm in the correct church, then all of you would be ecumenists, wouldn't you?
Well, we wouldn't be ecumenists, but we'd all be schismatic. Because if you're in the correct church and the confession of faith is correct on the part of your bishops, then we are all schismatic. There's no, because we're not ecumenists.
Well, how I don't know.
No, I think he's lagging out.
I was just gonna say I don't know how you wouldn't be though, because if you were to go pray with the Protestants, for instance, wouldn't you be ecumenist?
Yeah, but I don't know that ecumenist would be the right word.
No?
Because ecumenist means you acknowledge that they have some shortcoming of faith, but you still believe, you still act as if you're in, or you speak as if you're in communion with them. Like you say we're not in communion, but then you act as if you still are. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Doesn't make sense,
I think that's fair under that definition.
But if they're schismatic, they're not gonna act as if you're in communion.
Right.
So I guess
what I missed. I kind of vanished.
No, we were just operating on what the definition difference was.
I was just defending you, Deacon.
Between schism and ecumenism. So.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, first off, ecumenism is what we would call a pan-heresy or a heresy. A heresy is a false teaching. In St. Basil's canonical epistle, he describes types of separations from the church. The first one being heretical groups. They've fallen away from the teaching of the church. The second one is schismatics, who are factions within the church who have separated administratively and have the same faith, but should not have separated. There was no good reason. It's a split in the bond of love. And finally, there are parasynagogues or false assemblies. These are basically people who have no authority whatsoever, who have invented it.
Then operating off of that definition in the first part of it, which is a heresy, if you schism and are incorrect, is that not heresy?
No, that's just schism. If you accuse someone of heresy, but let's say somebody made up a heresy. I don't know, the heresy of I'm trying to think, the heresy of smokers. Okay, so then everyone who smokes is out of the church. Okay, then they're heretics.
Sure.
You see, that's a false accusation because clearly smoking is not a heresy, and we can talk all day about it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is, I would therefore be accusing you of heresy, but I would be doing it falsely.
Yeah, but if you believe false teachings, wouldn't you be a heretic?
Yeah.
Well, then if you're not part of the church, then you have to believe necessarily in false teachings, right?
Yeah, of course. But the point I'm trying to make is
wouldn't you? I don't understand how you wouldn't be a heretic then. That's I don't understand that.
Well, because sometimes there are claims of heresy that aren't legitimate. And this is something that has actually occurred over time, where people have accused each other of heresy and have even separated. A good example is the Ankratites. They refused to have wine, so on and so forth, and they felt the people who did were polluted. And so effectively, they eventually created a faction based on this belief that if you were polluted by, wine or, other things, I think sex was another thing. The point is that even though these were not actual teachings, if you were polluted by these, you shouldn't be touched. So that was their attitude. And the church actually exercised some level of leniency as they returned to the church. But yeah, there's been false accusations of heresy. Now the question is, that's a whole other can of worms, because what you're really opening the question up to is ecumenism a heresy? And ultimately, I don't know that we covered it. But in any case, I see where you're going with that. But
Yeah.
no, I don't think that a false accusation of heresy wouldn't make a person a heretic. It would just make them a false accuser.
Well, I understand that distinction, but I don't know. I think that I think my logic on it is sound. But fair enough. I see that there's callers in the background. You guys want to move
that's
into
what I was
that?
gonna say. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry if I
that's
got
all
my
really
face
got.
pressed up against the phone. I have a very loud fan, so using this without my headset, I can't always hear.
It's a million times better than what you had.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah, it's way
Okay.
better than when you're on your PC. So, yeah, that's all the questions I have. Then we do have one caller. If anybody else wants to get in and ask a question, get in the Discord. Do all the things. Tag us. We'll get you a link and get you on here. But Wozna, however you say that. Welcome. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Wasna. It's nice to finally meet you.
Yeah.
a lot of errand running. So-
No.
Oh, okay. Hey, what's going on? I get you.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
get your Discord.
I think I'll have like a question for each of you, if that's fine.
Sure.
I'll go with the Father Deacon first. Kind of a question that has a question under the question. So basically, like 1.5 questions, but I'll try to keep it compact.
Okay.
Going back to the anathema of 1983, with Saint Philaret of New York and the Real Core Sober, 1983. Going over like the history over the when local councils and synods and ecumenical councils would release anathemas and condemn heresies and heretics. Do you argue that the anathema of 1983 is applicable to the entire church?
Yes, because anathemas, by their nature, affect the entire church. There's no such thing as there's such thing as a local heresy in practice, in that it's only been seen in one part of the world. But there's no such thing as a local heresy in teaching. Something that is false teaching in America is false teaching in Russia, is false teaching in Greece, is false teaching everywhere. So once a local anathema has been pronounced, it becomes an issue, especially if that heresy spreads outside the region. In the case of the Russian church abroad, you're talking about the region outside Russia. That's a pretty large region. So the point is, all of those people were affected by the anathema against ecumenism. I can even point. I remember even OCA priests, 20 years ago, saying when it came down to it, they didn't call him Saint Philaret then because it was before his relics were incorrupt and people glorified him on some of the true Orthodox side. But the point is, they'd say he drew the line because they knew there was a problem and he drew the line.
Yeah. And the sub question under that is, what happens to local churches that do not embrace that anathema, even though it's Orthodox?
Well, I mean, there's ways that it can accidentally be fixed. I've often pointed to the example of the Church of Poland, which actually reversed their subscription to the 1920 encyclical unto the Churches of Christ Everywhere. It's not as good as accepting the anathema, but effectively wiping it from history is not exactly a terrible. Wiping ecumenism from history is not a terrible alternative. But realistically, especially as we're talking about ecumenism itself, it's a global phenomenon. It's in every country. It's a much bigger problem that affects everybody. So it has universal application.
Okay. Thank you for the answers. And then Andrew, can I ask you a question too?
Certainly.
Okay, cool. Thank you for I wanted to thank you again publicly for doing this, because this is the first time, I think, in the English speaking world where a discussion or whatever, a debate. It's actually the second one, RS was the first one.
Right. Yeah.
But doing this publicly, this needs to happen more often.
I have no problem talking to people from wherever about anything, about viewpoints that I have contention with. So
okay,
you don't ever need to thank me for that.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is in regards to the World Council of Churches, and it kind of has to do with also the sorrowful epistles of Saint Philaret of New York. Are you familiar with the sorrowful epistles?
So try to understand this from my perspective.
Okay.
That I don't have a great grasp on church history.
Okay.
So
Okay.
from the start, try to understand
Yeah.
why I make rejections. So
I see.
before I ever look at anything that's historical, I look at,
Mhm.
to see whether a person's telling me something which is logical and
Okay.
soundly reasoned. If
Okay.
both of those things are not present, I don't even
Okay.
bother with their claims of
Okay.
whatever they think historically supports whatever their illogical or non-well-reasoned claim is.
Yeah. But what
Does
if
that make sense?
Yeah, and so then maybe to go into that, maybe I'll have a question for you. It's another one, I guess. What if you had certain saints making certain claims that you thought were illogical from your point of view? What would you do with that?
So that's different. You're talking then about bringing in the addition of metaphysics, which when you bring in metaphysical claims,
Right.
those can be transcendent to what we would consider basic reasoning.
Okay.
They don't seem any time I've looked at the miraculous to actually defy logical laws necessarily, but they can definitely defy what you would consider intrinsic reasoning, and I think that that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, metaphysical aspects of things it's odd, but they actually do fit into what's logically possible. It is logically possible that statues can cry. I mean, there's no contradiction entailed there.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah, kind of. But I'll go back to the question about the World Council of Churches. I'll respect that. You just don't know fully the history, and that's fine. I mean, but you do understand, like, I guess, what the World Council of Churches is. So I could try to ask this question. Okay, perfect. So if you go to like the World Council of Churches website and you see a list of every local church that is in the World Council of Churches. Does that and in order to be in the World Council of Churches, you have to subscribe to the joint declarations, the documents, everything that is signed in the World Council of Churches. Is it not fair to say then, do you think, that every church that is in the World Council of Churches has forsaken their Orthodox confession of faith being in that organization?
In fact, that wouldn't even follow. So think about this. You're saying that based on these two declarations, I still do not or have not been convinced that this second declaration, which came after, did anything short of expanding the definition of what ecumenism is. The demonstration would actually have to show that every bishop was following a heresy. I don't think that itself would cut muster, no, or following in the steps of being heretics, essentially, right, and engaging in ecumenism.
Well, the reason why that last sentence is so important, when you read the 1983 anathema, and when it talks about knowingly being in communion with heretics, the reason why that is so important, and I would lovingly disagree with you, because that sentence is based on the apostolic canons about being in communion with heretics, and the canons of the church are the rules and the precepts of God.
Yeah, but let me ask you this.
So, wait,
Andrew,
can I finish? Can I finish real quick?
You can. Go ahead.
Okay. And so the reason why I would say that's not splitting hairs is to caveat up what Father Deacon was trying to say when he brought up the anathema, is Bishop Gabriel in his deposition openly admitted that ROCOR had to forsake the anathema of 1983 because they would be falling under their own anathema, knowingly going into communion with the Moscow Patriarch because they're heretics.
I understand what you're saying, but hear me out, right? Listen to this backwards. So did the schism happen in 1983?
What schism?
The schism which led to true orthodoxy, which would be the schism over the calendar, essentially. When did that happen?
No, that's
no.
ROCOR.
No. Yeah, the anathema of 1983, all that the anathema of 1983 did.
No, that's what I'm saying, though, is that you're hinging your argument on the justification of the schism on this thing, which happened post-schism. You understand?
No, so since I'm true Orthodox, I'll explain the argument. The argument is the anathema itself draws clear boundaries as to what the church is and what the church is not. That's what an anathema is and what it does.
So then, if this is, hang on. So then, if this is true, this anathema, though, did not exist at the time of which this schism happened originally, correct?
Well, all anathema does is declare what's already declared in heaven. That's what anathema does. So
yeah,
Arius
that doesn't answer my question, though.
Well,
right?
Okay,
like I get it.
Can you ask the question again?
I understand what you're saying is descriptive, right? So descriptively, I'll just agree with that. But what I'm saying is that this debate has hinged on one sentence between these two documents. Fair enough, but the schism happened long before either of these documents even came into being, right?
Correct.
And so now currently the justification for why the schism is okay is because of this document. And so what you're saying is that this retroactively is what they believed the entire time. So then how come in 1983 they didn't reunify with the church then?
I think I can.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so we would say if you, like, for instance, in the calendar issue, I mean, the true Orthodox of Greece, I mean, it depends because, I mean, that's a whole, like Father Deacon said, these are all, like, if you look at the true Orthodox situation in Romania, Russia, Greece, all these situations are happening around the same exact time frame, and they require separate conversations. And so the reason why I'm trying to focus on the anathema of 1983 is because it was a local church that pronounced that anathema. And over time, over time, if you look at church history, when a local church pronounces an anathema, it is incumbent on the entire church to adopt that anathema. And if they don't adopt it, and in fact, they violate it, then they fall under it, and therefore they are not in the church. That's the argument.
Well, this doesn't answer the question, though, as to why it is that there was no problem with this 1983 anathema, right? Or 84, whichever one it was. You guys accept that this is correct, right?
Yes.
If that's correct, why was there no reunification?
Well,
go ahead, Father Deacon.
Anathemas don't reunify. Anathemas separate the heretics from the church. But the point is, if the heretics are in fact a rival hierarchy, that separates them from the church.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I get it, but
that's it.
But hang on, but this was prescriptively done where the churches adopted this, correct?
Other churches didn't adopt this, except
no, the churches rejected it.
Yeah,
and they rejected the okay, got it. We'll get back into it, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it cuts mustard for me.
So
make
I
this make this your last point because we got.
Yeah, well, I guess at the end of the day, the question is whether the anathema of 1983 is an actual Orthodox anathema. Is it or is it not Orthodox?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll have to dive into kind of
That's
your supporting documents here, and we'll figure this out. But
yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, no problem, Wasna. Appreciate it.
I didn't mean to give you a hard time, man. But you know,
I mean, I'm here for you to give me a hard time. It's a debate channel.
All right.
See ya.
Don't feel bad.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Next caller, we got Dougster. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I was really interested in this conversation because I really wanted to hear what everyone had to say. I just have one question and maybe one point to make before I ask it. In regards to how slowly the church moves, it did seem like it moved at record speed when it came to closing down churches over COVID. I don't know much about the history exactly, but I don't think it's ever moved faster than that.
Well,
and
that's
so,
because it wasn't moving. It was being moved. So in this case, you have different, for one thing, not every church shut down. In fact, a large amount of them didn't shut down and said no, but you had a compelling factor.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, you had a compelling factor at gunpoint.
You could say it was
at that
moved,
point when a gun's being pointed at you, you move quick.
Ironically, that's something you brought up as the moderator in our last debate, Andrew, and that was the fact that when you were at the, I guess what is it called, like the Orthodox Japonica or whatever? I didn't
Montanica.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That thing. So the point is, you had mentioned that during the COVID thing that a bishop said, "Vote with your feet." That's literally the application of Canon 15. That's what you do.
Yeah, but I think that he was giving a more concise prescription for that, which was based not around splitting off from the church, but rather maybe just finding a new church to go to. Which
Well,
was
yeah,
still,
we're not asking you to
yeah,
go invent a church. There's bishops already.
right. So that, I mean, that's the thing that I'm saying is like I think that that was a much more concise prescription, which I
Yeah.
understand and not only understand but agree with. There's really no, what else could you do, right?
Well,
There's not really anything else you could do. So
Right.
I think that's fair to say.
And I think that, and my point is that that's all true Orthodox did.
Well, that I have a dispute with. I think it's far different to say that that's what true Orthodox did, was just find a different church that didn't, didn't have priests who were garbage and this type of thing.
Well, no, they literally, like, if we take the example of the Catacomb Church in Russia, they rallied around the bishops that didn't sign the decree of Sergius. They went underground. With the Church of Greece, they rallied under the bishops of Greece that didn't fall to the new calendar. Bishops of Serbia helped them. Bishops of Jerusalem. One thing to remember is that what they call the old calendarists in Greece, we're celebrating in Jerusalem at the Holy Sepulchre all the way into the reign of Patriarch Diodorus, who eventually suffered greatly at the hands of Constantinople for even allowing it. But they had been going to Jerusalem the whole time. So this is something to keep in mind. There were true Orthodox serving in the Patriarch of Jerusalem until the late 80s. So this is all really recent stuff. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on there that's not always clear. It would be a mistake to assume that everyone just didn't recognize the true Orthodox in Greece or, et cetera. They did. There was a lot more history that's not being told.
Yeah, I understand that there may have been a gradual transformation, but that seems like that's how everything operates, right?
Not the church. The church shouldn't transform.
Right. But what I'm saying is like if you have an externality, it always seems like it's gradual. Very, very little or very few times is it just a sonic boom. It's usually gradual till it builds up and then there's an explosion. So
yeah, so you can understand the process is going to be huge, and unfortunately,
yeah, I understand it's broad. I get that. I understand that. I'm not naive to the world for sure.
I wasn't accusing you of it.
Anyway.
Okay, well, there was supposed to be one other caller. I guess he didn't make his way in. If you're listening, John, I sent you the link on Discord, so if you make it by the end of the stream, you can call in. If not, try next time. So with that, we're going to get to some super chats here. Over on Dono Chat, Wilham Bones sent $10, said absolutely nothing. Our favorite kind of super chats. Thank you for that. Zen Shapiro's doppelganger twin for $5 said Zen Zen ZZZ Zen Zen ZZZ Zen Zen. So I don't know what that means, but you guys got to know this. You got to understand this. A lot of people claim that I'm the doppelganger of famous celebrities. Some point to I don't know, Jason Kipnis or Nick Jonas or something. Understand this. I don't look like them. They look like me. Whoever this doppelganger person is, you look like me. I don't look like you. You look like me. Okay? That's the way it's going to be from this point forward. $10 from AC. He says, Father Deacon, if 30% of the Greek populace you claim are true Orthodox in Greece were in the church, could they not fix their jurisdiction? And if the issues being raised led to a legit anathema, would you return?
So those are two different questions. The first one is, would that a large number of people fix the issues in the church? Hierarchically, no. Unless you have control of the administration of the church, it wouldn't be enough. Now, the second question, if, say, for example, the Church of Greece went back to the old calendar and said, well, I'm not part of the Church of Greece, but the point is, if they said, we were wrong, we're going back to the old calendar, we're anathematizing ecumenism, I think that there's a number of old calendarists in Greece who would be like, including bishops, who would be like, all right, let's talk. We'll come back.
Well, can I take a point of contention here, though? Because when we're talking about this, I think that you would agree with me on this point, which is that Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, true Orthodoxy, all of them, they do require one thing. All of them have one thing in common they require, which is money. And if 30%...
That's everyone.
Yeah, that's everyone. And if 30% of the baseline of your donors are no longer donating, that seems like it's powerful incentive for bishops and the hierarchy to begin to change its tune. And that seemingly has worked in the past for correction within the Orthodox Church, even with localized parishes. So
And
I'm not, yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree. But that's one of the money is unfortunately one of these ugly factors that plays into the history. The Antiochian Patriarchate, for example, was old calendar until 1946. And what was the reason? There was a group of particularly rich Arabs who said that they would withdraw their money from the Patriarchate unless they switched to the new calendar. The lack of money on the part of Constantinople, if the donations start to dry up, unfortunately, we know the history with the Greek Archdiocese and the CIA and Athenagoras. The point is, if the government steps in and offers some money, that now gives the government leverage over that church. So yeah, on the one hand, yeah, you could lose 31% of your donations, but if then suddenly the U.S. government says, well, we'll give you another 20% equivalent of the donation so you guys can keep operating.
I mean, that's like what the best counter argument I've heard tonight, because that's exactly what happened with Protestants. Like
So
literally,
what?
that's to most Protestant churches, that's what happens. Is they're kind of baseline, more Puritan people who reject LGBTQ and all this nonsense say, nope, we're not going to do this anymore and leave. The parish doesn't even suffer from it because suddenly there's handouts from corporations who take up to 40% of their what's called an outreach budget
Yep.
to go to pastors and say, hey, see this bag of cash? Put that flag out front. That seems like it's very tempting. It seems like it's very tempting.
And the worst part of it is this: is that really in this modern era that we're talking about, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, the whole industrial world was kind of working in this direction too. As one person once famously put it, I forget which clergyman told this to me, which priest, and he said, honestly, it should make sense that among mainline Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox, you will see a bunch of liberal modernists. And there's a reason for that. And that is because of the fact that where else can you make $100,000 a year on a philosophy degree? The point is, it doesn't matter what you believe. It's a career option for a lot of these people.
Yeah,
So
I don't. Well, there's a lot of what you say I don't disagree with in principle.
Yeah.
And that's obviously that's something I've covered incessantly. How much the outreach from these there's three massive outreach programs which take corporate money and literally hand bags of cash, actual physical bags of cash to priests and to pastors, and it's insanity to me. But when that Faustian deal comes up with money, I'm just stunned at how many people are right on it. They're like, oh, well, maybe a rainbow flag's not that. I mean, we want them in here anyway, so we can change them, right? But what's that old saying? If you dance with the devil don't change. Devil changes you, right? So just saying.
You're right. You're right on that. I know.
Anyway.
Okay, we did get our caller in here, so I'll give him a chance to come on. John, go ahead whenever you're ready with your question. Are you there, John? John, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. So I'll give you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm guessing he's got audio issues.
Okay.
Well, you did just mute and unmute. Oh, I think I saw him move. The ball move, so he's there.
Yeah. John,
he's
are
talking,
you there?
but that doesn't mean he can hear us. Can you
Yeah.
hear us, John?
Right. John, going once, going twice. All right. Hey, just come back whenever you can figure out your audio issues.
Oh, he popped back in.
Okay. All right. Can you hear us, John? Hello. John,
Okay,
hello?
you muted yourself, John.
No.
Okay, we might have to move on then. Anyway, okay, we'll
John,
get to the next
if what's going on, I think what's going on, John, if you can hear me, is you're using a Bluetooth. And if you're using a Bluetooth, open StreamYard up in a browser rather than clicking the link. So take the link, put it up in a browser, and then you'll get the audio both ways like you should. Try that.
Okay. In the meantime, we'll get to this next super chat from AC for $10. Says, Andrew, if a statist and heretical left-wing or even positivist right-wing or whatever else church was the step, hang on, we'll get to that. Hang on, let me John's back, so we'll get to that next. John, are you there? Hello?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Hello? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you. You hear us?
Okay. Awesome. Sorry for that delay. I don't know what was going on there.
No, you're good.
No problem.
So I have, I guess, one simple question for Father Deacon Joseph. He made the big accusation that he could prove that all the bishops in World Orthodoxy supported ecumenism, either directly or indirectly. That's kind of one of the arguments he made.
It's a big argument. I understand.
I guess this question isn't necessarily the 100% the 100% evidence, but it is a pretty big game changer. And the question is well, I guess it's two questions. One is, what is the canonical penalty for someone who were to pray with heretics, or let's just say light a menorah with Jews?
That is for a layman, that's excommunication. For a priest, that's deposition.
And how many bishops does it take to excommunicate or depose?
You just need a functioning synod. So, technically 6 bishops is a functioning synod. 12 bishops is a functioning synod that can judge a bishop. So the answer would be basically as little as 6 bishops. But after 12, you've got basically quorum.
Okay. All we would need is six minimum, 12 bishops in one of the jurisdictions to get together and to basically depose any of the other bishops or patriarchs that are basically participating in the heresy. Am I understanding that?
Qualifier. That has to occur locally. In other words, say, for example, bishops of the True Orthodox Church of Greece or bishops of the New Calendar Church of Greece anathematize each other. That doesn't give them the right to, say, anathematize Russia or anathematize the U.S. That, like, you have to stay within your local region, because Orthodoxy by its nature is decentralized. So yeah, it would have to be a local church. It's that's why we use the term local church. It's referring to the church of a locality in the country.
Right, but it shows that the local churches are not gathering together to take action against, well, I guess within their own local jurisdictions, right?
But that's why there's True Orthodox all over the world. I mean, they're in every country. Every Orthodox country has True Orthodox in it. Okay. Yeah, I just I guess it's kind of a big deal when it's such a small number, and yet this hasn't happened or isn't happening, and there was an anathema already, and still kind of nothing else is happening. So that's kind of a point that if the bishops were really against, there wouldn't be silence, and there would be something that would happen. If it only takes 6, 12. The anathema in 1983 was 40 years ago.
Right, and by now everyone knows about it. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, Andrew, I know you said that you're not extremely knowledgeable about church history. Do you know about St. Maximus the Confessor? Anything about his life by any chance?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So the example I'm going to bring up is, and I guess it's kind of a basic question, but in the book about his life on page 20, he said that there were alterations and additions to the ecthesis and the typos, distorting the definitions of the councils. These innovations were made by the foremost representatives of the Church of Byzantium, Sergius, Pyrrhus, and Paul, and they are known to all the churches. This is the reason why I, your servant, will not enter into communion with the Church of Constantinople. Let these offenses introduced by the aforementioned men into the church be removed. Let those who have introduced them be deposed, and let the path to salvation Oh, and the path to salvation will be cleared of all barriers, and you will walk on the smooth path of the gospel, cleansed of all heresy. When I see the Church of Constantinople as she was formerly, then I will enter into any heritations in her, and will are her bishop. No word or deed will convince me of communion with her. And
John,
that
you're
was
cutting out a little bit there. It's kind of hard
that
to hear what
was
you're saying.
okay. So Saint Maximus the Confessor basically established the patriarch and the bishops. The typos a document that
John, I'm sorry.
basically
It's hard to make out what you're saying. You're roboting a lot.
But
Okay.
but to kind of answer to this though, I don't mean to cut you off. I want to be again as charitable to you guys coming on as I
Right.
possibly can. So I have no problem with what you're saying up to the point where you say what he's saying is this is your interpretation, and
Right.
it's difficult for me to even engage with what your interpretation is unless you were to forward that to me. We can kind of go over it together. I think that
Okay.
would be fair.
Well, yeah, and I guess the question is then based off of the fact that the confessor was not in communion and clearly established why he wasn't, and the reason, basically the boundary by which he would reestablish communion, would he have been a schismatic for breaking communion with Constantinople?
I don't know.
Would that have been
I mean,
wrong?
that's
And
the
and is
thing.
he the
It's like,
church?
right.
Well,
So hang on. So I'll just address the question. I don't know. That's above my pay grade, dude. Okay,
Yeah.
it's above my pay grade.
I can answer the question. No, he wasn't a schismatic. The life, I know what he's referring to in the life, Andrew. Basically, to summarize it, and I'm summarizing here, you can look at the life itself, but the point is, he's presented with the typos by the representatives of the emperor, and he's told to sign. He says he refuses to sign it, and he has no communion with any of the bishops that signed it. So he basically is breaking communion with everybody. But no, he's not schismatic in any way, shape, or form. They were signing a heretical document.
Right, and he was just a monk. He wasn't even a priest or a bishop. He was just a monk. But
Yeah, try to understand again from my position before I even attack any of the groundation for documentary support. The first thing that has to be established for me is something that's logically true, or at least has been well reasoned out, so that I can even follow it. And I'm not even to that point yet. So, but we've
Right.
established what it would take to get me to that point, and then I think we could have that kind of debate.
well, thank you very much.
Sure, John.
All
Have a
right,
good day.
Thank you
man.
for the call, John. All right, and we'll get to the rest of these super chats here. AC for $10 says, Andrew, this is a wordy ass question, so just try to follow it. If a statist and heretical left wing, or even positivist right wing, or whatever else church was established over orthodoxy to the point nothing could be done, would you join a catacombs church? That's
So you're saying like a church which is, because this actually happened, I think, right? Like this actually happened under the communist Soviets, where they did take it underground. And I mean, of course, that's all you could do. You know, that's all you could do. So yeah, I think probably the answer to that would be yes.
Okay. And this is from John, who just called in. I'll just read it since he sent the super chat in. I believe this was for Deacon Joseph. What is the canonical penalty for joint prayers with the heterodox or lighting a menorah with Jews? How many bishops does it take to depose or excommunicate? But yes, you already answered that.
Yeah.
And then he quotes St. Gregory Palamas, the silence of the clergy is atheism. Okay. So yeah, you kind of already addressed all that. For $33 from Anonymous, no message entered by user. Our favorite kind of super chats. Thank you so much, Anon. We appreciate that. Now to the YouTube super chats, we got some dad jokes. Brace yourselves. We got some Wicked Wally dad jokes. First one here, Randy West for $2 says, "Good to see Zen back. God bless Crucible Crew. Thank you very much." You know, I don't like to say that, like, good to see Zen back. I'm not back because I never left. It's just, you know, it's just I've been on a little hiatus. Life is going on. Life's fucking, you know, shit's busy. Sometimes it happens. channels going through like a transition between backup channels and strikes and all kinds of shit's going on. So I'm not always as available, but I'm also not back because I never left. Okay, I'm still here. All right, but thank you, Randy. I know what you mean. Thank you for the super chat. Philip Hansen becomes a YouTube member. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Send those tomato soup cans. It's a great time. Philip also sends for $10. Everyone agrees the EP in the 20s was shady, especially with the calendar issue. Why not bring a heretical bishop by bringing him to a spiritual court and disposing him instead of splitting away?
I think he meant deposing, maybe.
Yeah,
I
he means deposing him.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Is that for me or for?
Yeah, it's for you.
I think that's for you.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that's a perfectly good question. As I mentioned when John called, bishops of his court would have to actually depose him. So the Patriarch of Constantinople would necessarily have to be deposed by the Synod of Constantinople. Unfortunately, if you know anything about the crazy politics that was going on in Greece at the time, and there were royalists and loyalists and Venizelos and all socialists, all sorts of crazy people. Meletios Metaxakis actually was physically dragged out by the people in Constantinople from his church, and then he just fled to Alexandria and he changed the calendar there. And then somehow he got elected to Alexandria after doing this horrible mess in Constantinople. And then he was like, I'm going to apply to be Patriarch of Jerusalem, but he died. So God was like, no, that's enough. But in any case, yeah, it's not as easy as that. Now, it would have been great if the next ecumenical patriarch wasn't pro-heresy. But unfortunately, the next few were kind of yes men to the English government. And that occurs until Athenagoras, where we see the obedience shift from England to the United States. And because Athenagoras was actually, when he first was Archbishop of America, he actually, and again, there's a place to look this up would be Orthodox History, Matthew Namie's site. He actually talks about how like Patriarch Athenagoras wrote the White House and explained, I have like 100,000 Greeks or something that are now in your service if you need them for the military or anything. Like he's just telling the U.S. government, okay, here, you can have all my people, which is really weird. But yeah, so he kind of immediately sold out to the powers that be. And unfortunately, he then became the next Patriarch of Constantinople. Then the next, it's kind of like a circular sort of thing. That's why people who have a problem with Alpidophoros in America right now don't realize he's probably going to be the next Patriarch of Constantinople. It's almost certain.
Okay. And like I said, brace yourselves for the dad jokes. They're inbound. They're coming. Wicked Wally for $5. The dirty secret of Freemasonry. They never actually provide you with free bricks or concrete. Terrible, Wicked Wally. Terrible dad.
That
joke.
was a terrible joke, dude.
It was horrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Maybe we need to depose Wicked Wally from his Crucible mod.
Yeah, totally.
Until he steps up
the audience is booing him right now.
Yeah, bring it on. Bring on the tomato soup, guys. Throw the cans at Wicked Wally. Terrible dad joke. Next one here, we got Nico Pluto. It's nice to see Nico Pluto again, but he's not back because he never left either. He's calling us all weirdos. He is the judge, the jury, and the executioner when it comes to declaring who's a weirdo and who's not. He's basically speaking ex cathedra. He's basically declaring infallibly who's a weirdo and who's not. But thank you, Nico Pluto, for the $20. We appreciate that. And last one, brace yourselves again. Wicked Wally for $5. Why was the army doctor going around circumcising everyone? He was collecting survival tips.
Oh, God. That was just bad. It was just bad.
That was gross.
That's not even
a dad joke. Dad jokes have a sort of humor to them.
And they're usually like clean humor. It's not like something that's going to gross you out. But
yeah, that is nasty.
this is what we get. Keeping
People
Wicked
are
Wally
now
around.
requesting we ban them in the chat,
Yeah.
just so that
Yeah,
so that will stop. It's terrible.
You have been disposed, Wicked Wally.
Yeah, Wicked Wally has been deposed. We're going
Right.
to hold a synodal council to determine if he gets banned or not. But anyway, that's it for the super chats. I believe that's all we got, and that's it for callers. So yep, we're good to go. Thank you guys all for being here. Thank you everybody in the audience for watching. Before we go, as always, we're going to give you guys one more chance to shout yourselves out. Deacon Joseph, go ahead. Tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me at nftu.net and NFTU News and Apologetics on YouTube. And either way, and I also have a Gab account. It's basically, and I also have the Twitter NFTU account. Basically, NFTU is just all over the place. So if you just are looking for me, nftu.net's the central hub, and the rest is you'll find me with that same identity there.
Before we go, Wicked Wally says, I'll start my own chat with blackjack and hookers. Actually, forget the chat.
Jeez. It's anyway, yeah, well, you guys know me. I'm Andrew Wilson, the host of The Crucible. I very much appreciated this back and forth, and I'm sure that we'll do another round down the road. I'll get some of these documents together that he provides as proofs for his position, and I think that we'll have a good-spirited back and forth again. So I appreciate you coming on, Deacon.
Thank you.
I appreciated
Likewise.
it very much. It was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was worth the wait. Again, I'm really sorry that's not the typical Crucible experience. So
I get it. I told you right off the bat, I've been having crazy stuff to do even up to the very start of this debate. So I completely get it.
Well, have a great Father's Day, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I can
have a
wish
great
that my
Father's
son
Day. I wish we had more people having kids so I could wish more people a great Father's Day.
I've done well. That's one of the great things about Orthodoxy, and I hate to be crude about it, but part of the reason why true Orthodox are growing is because they follow traditional Orthodox morals, which means they have more kids, and that makes them bigger and bigger and bigger. And demographics is destiny.
Yeah, I'll get your Discord handle, add you on Discord too, and then Zen, happy Father's Day to you too, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
Father's Day to both of you. I assume both dads.
Thanks. You guys too. Yeah, I'm a new father. I just had my first about 7 months ago. So, yeah.
It's gonna be
we
fun.
We did get one more super chat from Theodore for $2. I believe that is also Wasna.
Yeah.
Thank you for that super chat. Says absolutely nothing. Our favorite kind of super chats. Appreciate that very much. Yeah, I enjoyed the debate too, guys. I enjoyed that it was a lot more civil than the first encounter that Deacon Joseph had.
It was it was always yeah, I think I hate to say it, but part of that, and I feel bad for Resident Sleeper on that, because I was harsher. I didn't mean to be, but the nature of the question is different. The question in the first debate, where is the Orthodox Church, necessitates one to have to explain that there are two bodies claiming to be the Orthodox Church. Resident Sleeper's position was automatically going to have to be that anyone not who is claiming to be the Orthodox Church that was not in his church is an interloper. And effectively, the only counter that I would have to that is the counter that would be the reason why, which entails automatically an accusation of ecumenism. Even if I was able to demonstrate without a problem very quickly, which is almost impossible when we're talking about global history over 100 years. Even if I was able to give a snap definition of what it was and prove it among all of World Orthodoxy's bishops, there's no actual impetus, unless I prove it from the fathers, for Andrew to say, well, I have to go now. He doesn't have to. In which case, the worst I can possibly accuse him of is being lazy. But the point is that
true.
It's a different argument. It's a completely different argument.
Yeah, but it's true. It is true. Yeah. I try to be as lazy as I possibly can, except when I'm creating content, which I create great content.
That.
So
I feel it.
Anyway.
All right. Well, that'll do it for the stream. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it like I did. From all of us here at the Crucible to all of you in Crucible Land, have a wonderful night.